This is TWiT.
All right, so Slack didn't waste any time rolling out a major new feature to its work chat platforms. Kind of happened suddenly. I don't know that I even knew that it was in the works. Earlier this week, Connect DM suddenly appeared in the Slack toolkit, which allows users to basically send a direct message to anyone in any other organization through Slack, not just in their own organization, but outward as well. And what could possibly go wrong? Well, joining us to talk about the new feature and what could possibly go wrong is Kate Cox from Ars Technica. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. So let's talk a little bit, first of all, before we get into the stuff, kind of the reaction to this feature, what the feature actually is and kind of what Slack intended for it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So a while back, Slack, not that long ago, I suppose, but Slack added a new feature called Slack Connect, which allows different organizations to share a channel for collaboration purposes, which is meant to work really well if you provide something to a client or two groups are working together on a project or whatever. Two companies can share a channel to collaborate. Easy. What they added this Wednesday was a feature called Connect DM, which allows people at any organization that uses Slack to send direct messages to any other user at any company in the world, or even users who have a private email address, Slack, to send Slack DMs to them.
So then, shortly after, I started seeing messages from people, pretty upset with the feature because it seems like, and as you wrote about, it was kind of a loophole in the system. It seems really easy to allow people who are interested in harassing others to reach the person on the other end. There are a lot of platforms out there that have tools in place to prevent a harasser from even getting their message through to the other person, right? And this seemed to have a very large loophole. Talk a little bit about that and how it could have been manipulated with.
Yeah, so from where I sit on the East Coast, the feature was live by the time I sat down to work Wednesday morning. And basically immediately, like by the time I even noticed it was there were already people everywhere saying, this just sends a message directly to your inbox with whatever a person has put in. It just, there's no filter for it. Like you can't opt to block an individual user. You can't opt to not receive single person's emails. It's just whatever a person puts in this invite box that at the time had 500, 600 characters available went directly to the recipient's inbox. So you could write, whatever vile things you wanted in there, and a person would have no easy way to block you from doing it.
Right, exactly, because it's not it. From my understanding of the feature, because I didn't test it out myself, but from my understanding, that message is coming from kind of like this general purpose Slack address. So even if you wanted to say block that email address for the notification is coming from or whatever, then you're blocking it system wide for everything. It's not specific to that particular sender. If it was another way, then you would never see it because you could block it per person, but that's just not the way this operated, right? It was pretty much this blanket address.
Yes, exactly. It came from a general purpose email address. So if you block it, you're blocking functionally all Slack notifications that might come from that address, which, there's a lot of good reasons you might want to get Slack notifications for things happening in your own company and not hear from some rando who wants to send you a very unflattering opinion of something you may or may not have done.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting to me about how this all played out is, a lot of the reaction, people were saying like, I'm really surprised that a company like Slack or a large tech company at this point of the game isn't already tuned into how these things can be manipulated and played from this angle, from this perspective. How is it like, and I realize this is more of an opinion question than anything, but in your mind, considering that Slack did this and then realized what they had done and undid it, thankfully, like how does a company like Slack or name any other tech company, how does this get through that filter? Because at this point, we're so like clued into this as a reality of modern day internet. Like, why isn't this on the radar, at least, to understand, oh, this is a part of the system that could really be manipulated?
Yeah, to Slack's credit, they walked it back within hours. I posted the story at my time right after lunch, and a half hour later, the invite feature had been severely curtailed, which is good. It's great that they listen to feedback, and all credit to them for that. But it does really, in the year 2021, we had an entire president and presidential campaign and entire ecosystem around him who existed in the internet troll harassment mode. This is not something that's happening in the fringe anymore. Back, I hate to say this aloud, but back in the Gamergate years, 2012 to 2014, 2015, you could still dismiss this as sort of a fringe element that doesn't happen over here if you wanted to. But I think the fact that troll culture made it to literally the White House, at this point in time, you should really be thinking, if you're developing any kind of communication or internet tool, what harms can this cause? Who can be hurt? And how can we mitigate that? And I am a little surprised that a company valued at $28 billion as recently as December, when Salesforce, announced they're going to buy it for that much money, I'm a little surprised there wasn't anybody in the room who could point that out to them before they rolled this out.
Yeah, that is surprising to me too. Now, okay, so Slack did, as you say, they pretty quickly reversed course. Have they indicated whether they have plans to do this, roll this out in a safer way, or are they just like, okay, whoa, that was a really bad idea, let's just scrap the messages entirely, they're unnecessary? Do we have any word from them as far as what their intentions are going forward as far as this is concerned?
They're keeping the function, last I heard. Their CEO gave a interview last night or this morning about it, but they are definitely scrapping the custom invite part that lets you write anything in. So at least if it's just sort of an email request that, hey, this person wants to talk to you, that is at least a lot easier to delete, ignore, do nothing with. It is much harder to cause harm with just that little notification. Bob Smith at X Corp wants to ping you. That's right. Something at least that is not of itself usually going to be a problem. Yeah,
absolutely. Can a user choose to deactivate just this whole feature if they wanted to, or are they automatically opted in?
Not yet. I don't know. I don't think they've said if they plan to amend that. For now, it is something that the server admin opts into at sort of the organizational level. And I will say there were definitely a lot of stories floating yesterday that admins and organizations, realizing this was also a total vector for phishing and other sort of intrusions into a corporate box, so to speak, we're definitely locking it down immediately. We don't want people from other corporations coming into our workplace this way, especially while we're all working remotely. Let's not.
Yeah, that's I think kind of where my mind jumped when I first heard of this story, barring the loophole that we've been talking about. But just it seems like, and this is a horrible comparison, but it seems like mixing the chocolate with the peanut butter and that actually sounds delicious. But let's assume that mixing chocolate and peanut butter tastes horrible. It just seems like kind of a misdirection for a service that is so hyper focused on productivity within an organization, that now suddenly it kind of expanding out into this multi-purpose all access messaging client. I don't know. It just seems like a little I guess I can understand why Slack would do it. There's always going to be pressures for them to expand their tool set and expand their features and everything. Is it perhaps that, other companies are kind of, encroaching on their business in other ways? Zoom, has done great for video calls. So maybe Slack is less the place to turn for that now. Teams for business organization. Is that kind of like your insight on this? Why did Slack feel like they needed to add a feature like this and feel that organizations would be open to it?
Yeah, from Slack's point of view, based on what I've seen, executives say in interviews and what they've said about the feature, I think from Slack's point of view, expanding as a messaging platform makes sense. They want to be the thing you check on your phone for work purposes, as opposed to, one of Facebook's properties like Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram or whatever being the thing you check on your phone for personal connections. That said, I don't have the overwhelming impression that either organizations or workers necessarily think of their work tools the same way. Yesterday right. I was talking about this in Slack with my coworkers and, on other platforms with other people. And the overwhelming response I saw was, why? I don't want that. Why would I use this? There's no point. And that said, even if you do have a use case for it, which I don't doubt for a minute someone somewhere does, Slack is still very much to a lot of people like a digital version of your office building. And yes, sometimes you have people come in for client meetings or tours or interviews or whatever, but it's still kind of weird if you're going to your office kitchen, to fill up your coffee in the morning or whatever, and there's somebody you don't know standing there who can hear your conversations. And I think psychologically, a lot of people kind of have that reaction to bringing somebody into their Slack, where Slack is trying to position itself more against, I would say, especially Microsoft, who they filed an antitrust complaint against last year in Europe.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I'm waiting for, for one of those messages to come through for me to place full judgment on it. But right now I'm kind of like, I don't know that I necessarily need it. It really does feel out of place for me, but who knows? Maybe a year from now, we'll all be slacking everybody at all the other places and it'll be normal. Hopefully, though, at least the lessons are learned and it will prevent any sort of, harassment or whatever that we really don't want to see in platforms like this, especially a platform that's built around business. Not that there's another place for it to thrive and us not feel bad about it, but that seems like a particularly encroaching place for that to suddenly appear. So